So 2 weeks ago today was when we got the call from the school district saying that schools were going to be closed because of fears around the coronavirus. That was initially supposed to be for, I think, just 2 weeks, so through the end of this week. Then that quickly got extended to Easter, and it has now been extended to almost the end of April. So yeah, the kids have been home for 2 weeks now and attempting to do homeschooling while also doing my job, thankfully remotely. Yeah, welcome to Volunteer Parenting Coronavirus Edition. Before we get into much on the coronavirus stuff and how that intersects with parenting, a quick update on what's going on. About a week ago, I was called by DCS about an emergency placement. We'll call him M, and I agreed to take him for the weekend because I did have the space to do that. He hit it off really well with Y and asked if he could stay longer. I explained the situation with T, and I said, well, you know, T is going to be coming back here in about a month and a half. So I can't really guarantee beyond that point, but decided to say yes, at least for the time being. Currently, I have Y, I have M, on 2 nights a week I have B, and then of course I'm still keeping in touch with T because he's going to be coming back. And then the other thing to know is that this episode is going to be a little bit different. I'm putting on my professorial hat again, and I'm going to turn this into kind of a mix of educational about stuff we know about coronavirus and stuff going on with that. Maybe even some of how you can talk to your kids about this if you find that to be useful. So what is this coronavirus COVID-19 thing? Let's start by hearing what my kids thought about it.
It's a very bad disease that is basically shutting the whole world down.
There's a novel? There's a book about it?
No, novel doesn't have to mean a book. Novel can mean it's just unlike anything else.
That it's harder for children to get it than older people with respiratory issues.
Okay, so as you can see, a lot of unclear stuff going on here, right? And it's probably not just them. And so that was part of what inspired putting this video together in this way, was to take a little time to try to synthesize down what are some of the high points. So this graph that you can see here shows the basically the count of infection over time. And what you can see here is that in a very short period of time, in the span of only a few months, it has increased dramatically. As of the end of today, over 500,000 people globally have been infected. Somewhere around 82 or 83,000 people in the US alone have been infected. That puts the US as the highest number of infected people of any country. And it's important to note these numbers, absent any kind of change, are only going to increase. It is very likely that by the end of next week, we are going to see 1 million cases globally. And there's 2 reasons that these numbers are going to keep going up. One of those is that it is a highly contagious disease. We can spread it before we even know we have it. People are contagious with it before they even start showing symptoms, sometimes for several days. And testing, especially in the US, has been far below what is needed to really get a handle on what's going on. And so as we ramp up testing, we're going to see more cases. That just kind of comes with the territory. So what happens when one gets infected? You could have it for 5 or 6 days on average and not even realize it, but during that time still be able to pass it on to other people. Once you start showing symptoms, it will likely take 2 to even 3 weeks for the disease to run its course. Common symptoms include things like high fever, a dry cough, difficulty breathing, and in some cases we've even heard reports of people losing their sense of taste or smell. These are not the only symptoms, but they are among the most common, the most frequently cited. And from what people who have recovered from this disease have indicated, it's like a very, very heavy flu. It sounds like minus the sneezing and minus the nasal stuff. Let's talk about death for a second here. Even though it's really difficult to, it's important to think about this. This disease has killed people, and it will continue to kill people. So far, over 21,000 people globally have died. As of today, 1,100 Americans have died, and those numbers will only go up. Keep in mind that it takes 3 to 4 weeks total from the time one gets infected to the resolution of this disease. So the people we are seeing dying from this disease today got infected 3 to 4 weeks ago. What is the death rate exactly? It's really hard to calculate that in the middle of an epidemic. That's usually something you can't know for sure until the epidemic's over. But our best models indicate that the death rate is somewhere around 3.4%. And so though the total number of people who have died is still less than what it is every year from the flu, it's important to note that the flu has a death rate of only 0.1%. So the number of people who are going to die from this disease is going to far, far surpass those who die from the flu each year. So people who say that, oh, this is just like the flu, it might be like the flu in terms of symptoms, but that's really where the comparisons stop. In terms of the overall death toll this disease is going to have, it is much, much more serious than the flu. Now, lest I sound all doom and gloom, people do recover. I mean, 3.4% means that there's 96.6% of people who do survive. And to date, we've seen around 114,000 people who have recovered from this disease. About 400 of those recoveries have been in the U.S. Those numbers will, of course, also go up, but it also means a lot of people who are going to have to go through this first. And it's not going to be a walk in the park if you get it. All right, so sounds pretty bad. What should we do about it? Let's start by hearing from the kids again.
You can try not to get it by washing your hands, cleaning down surfaces. That's using a lot. That you use a lot.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Okay.
Washing hands frequently.
Okay. What else?
Do social distancing.
What does that mean?
Stay 6 feet away from people.
Okay.
Trying to make everybody social distance themselves, and nobody's really listening.
To limit the spread
of the virus, because you're not going to be able to prevent it completely.
Okay.
It's to help prevent it from spreading.
Only so
I
much
don't get why everybody's stockpiling on toilet paper.
I don't either.
I mean,
Unless they're only pooping in at work.
So let's talk through some of the things that they said. Social distancing, what is that? This is basically the idea of we need to maintain physical proximity away from each other. The general guidance from the CDC is at least 6 feet away from other people. Now, that doesn't mean you need to stay 6 feet apart from people in your own household, so long as everyone in the household is observing the social distancing rule when they leave the house. But it means when you leave the house, you need to maintain a distance from other people. And that's really hard, because we do like our closeness. We like to stand near to people and shake hands and things like that. Can't be doing that right now. That's a really bad idea, because that's going to make it really easy for this thing to spread. Another thing you may have heard a good bit about is what we call flattening the curve. Flattening the curve refers to the beginning of that curve that I just showed you of infection and the way it will look over time. And what we see on this curve is, the first curve is what the infection caseload would look like over time if we don't do anything. And it's going to spike really high. We are currently in the beginning part of that curve, just over here on the left. We've got a long way to go on this one. And it's going to peak really, really high. But if you look at that kind of dashed line going across the lower part there, this is a way to think about what is our healthcare capacity. If we allow this to proceed unchecked, we're going to overwhelm our healthcare system. In fact, we're already very, very close to doing that. But the idea of flattening the curve is that we need to do things like social distancing that will help us to lower how many people are infected at any one time. It's probably at this point not going to change the total number of people who will ultimately get infected, but it means that we don't have as many people infected simultaneously. And if we can keep that number low enough, then it means our healthcare system might be able to keep up with it. To put that a little more simply, if we can flatten the curve, we can save more lives. If we don't flatten the curve, more people are going to die who probably would not have had to die if they could have had medical attention. The other thing we probably need to do is also expand capacity. So we need to be looking for ways that we can increase numbers of beds in hospitals, number of healthcare personnel who are tending to the sick. The amount of equipment that we have is a major need we have right now. We need more protective equipment for those healthcare workers. And then relatedly, we also need more of the life-saving equipment like ventilators, one of the things we've heard about a lot, that can make the difference between life and death for people who have serious complications from this disease. So the idea of flattening the curve says we need to do these different kinds of things, and some of these are individual things like social distancing, and some of these are more social structural things like increasing healthcare capacity, but we need to do these kinds of things to be able to lower the overall rate of number of people infected at once, just so there's a chance of actually keeping up. Not to be too doom and gloom about it, but it's also important to note that if this gets too far out of hand, it is not just this disease that people will die from. There will be secondary deaths that will come along as well. Consider a scenario where we have a hospital that is already working at capacity and can not handle the caseload of all of the new COVID-19 patients coming in. And let's say someone has a heart attack or gets into a car wreck or anything of that nature that is just going to occur. What if there's no one available to be able to help that person because we already have all of our medical personnel and all of our resources devoted towards dealing with people who are suffering from the coronavirus? So that's all kind of scary, right? I mean, I'm a little bit scared and a little bit anxious. Let's hear from the kids on this first.
Scary.
Okay, what's scary about it?
I don't know what's going to happen.
That's fair.
That's same for me, but it's
It's random.
Yeah.
Like you don't know if you're gonna have it or not. You can have it and not even show any symptoms and pass it on to everybody and not even know it.
Right.
It's also depressing.
How so?
Because we're not gonna be going to school. Can't talk to our friends, people we care about. And all.
It makes you worry about your family, especially if you have grandparents. That are more prone to getting the virus.
Yeah.
It's the only disease that's just like sprouted up in my life, and it's making me a little nervous and anxious, and I don't like being nervous or anxious.
Yeah, clearly there's some fear, there's some anxiety, there's some concern about this. It's definitely a big thing. This is completely unprecedented. We have never had to deal with something like this before, and that's scary. There's a lack of control, there's a lack of information, there's a lack of certainty of what's going on, there's the legitimate fear of a very serious disease. It will likely impact someone we know and probably someone we care about. That's a lot to take in. So let's think for a minute about what we might expect going forward from here. Well, pretty much every school has closed down by this point. Many businesses have shut down or have, to the degree possible, set their workers home to be able to work from home, but a lot of people have lost jobs. There's going to be significant economic consequences that come from all of this, in addition to the public health and the individual health consequences. And there's talk about when will we have things back on track. In Tennessee, at least, the school closures and the order for state employees to work remotely has been extended as far as April 27th. No politician wants to tell you that this is going to last for months. But that's the reality. This is going to last for months. My optimistic guess is that we might start to return to something that resembles normal by the end of May. Maybe. And that's if and only if we can quickly and effectively put a lot of these policies into place that will help us to flatten the curve and get control of what's going on here. How do you think our government should respond to this virus?
Definitely
by making sure everybody actually self-quarantines.
Okay.
Like put out like a temporary
and
rule
testing.
And help give hospitals money to start doing the testings and get the equipment they need and stuff like that.
The PPE.
The what?
PPE, personal protective.
Oh, right, personal protective equipment. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, a grade 4 PPE. Because that's
what we need the serious stuff. Yeah. So it is very likely that the kinds of quarantining and shelter in place and social distancing suggestions and orders that we are getting, and they will expand, those are going to be going on for a while. We need to prepare ourselves for that. We need to prepare ourselves not just physically, because barring a complete societal collapse, we're still going to be able to procure food for ourselves. We're still going to be able to get by as long as we have some sort of economic resources at our disposal. And it does sound like that's about to be coming through with this bill that's working its way through Congress as I record this. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I'm not particularly concerned about the spike in gun sales that have been going on because people somehow need their security blanket. What I am really cautioning here is we need to prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally, because this is something very different, and it's something that most of us are not used to having to deal with. So how do we prepare ourselves? Let's think for a minute about what that looks like. I think one way we prepare ourselves is by first just accepting the reality that this is likely going to be at least 3 months, maybe a little bit longer than that, and go ahead and instead of thinking this as, well, it's to here and then the deadline gets moved and then it gets moved again, just go ahead and say it's probably going to be to here. And if we happen to be out of this thing sooner than that, great. We can throw a big party, or we can celebrate for that. That would be lovely and wonderful. But if it does take that long, then, at least our hopes aren't dashed. I think another important thing we can do is maybe turn it into a little bit of a game. And I don't say that as a way to make light of this. This is a very serious thing. But I'll give you a for instance. I have been really likening this whole experience to being on a starship. If you're on a starship, you've got basically the people who are there on the starship with you. You do occasionally get to leave the ship. You get to go on away missions to the grocery store. It's some unknown planet, and you're going to see what you find. But then when you get back, you have to decontaminate. To communicate with people, you don't actually get to go talk to them. You have to use the view screens, and you get them on the view screen because we're all doing Zoom and Skype and WebEx and all of those kinds of things right now. So if you kind of think of your house as a starship that doesn't go anywhere, then maybe you could turn it into a game of sorts. I think another really important thing to think about is to remember to express gratitude. This is a really good way of avoiding getting too caught up in depression and despair. What are you thankful for? Because even though things are difficult right now, and even though we may want something totally different, it's got to be something good going on. I'll give you a for instance here as well. I'm thankful that I have a job that already had me working from home. So that was an adjustment that I didn't have to make. And I'm also thankful that the job I have is one that is in a very secure position financially, that we're unlikely to be experiencing layoffs, at least in the near term. And in maybe a third thankfulness on all of this related to the job, that the leadership in my company has been very communicative with us. They have been very clear in making sure we are aware of what's going on and really letting us know that they are doing everything they can to make sure that all of our well-beings are looked after, both company-wide and as individual workers. Another thing I'm thankful for is that we have a place we can live. We have food on the table. So far, it's food that we're really enjoying. I hope that will continue. But if it doesn't, I'm creative. And as long as I have some base ingredients, I can figure some stuff out. So maybe that's something to think about too. Sit down with your family. Actually sit down with your family and talk through some of this. We did this yesterday. That's part of where I got the video from, but then even after the camera was off, we just sat around and talked about how do we feel about this and what are we thankful for and how are we going to respond. And it was really good to take that time as a group to really work through some of these things. So take the time to sit down with the loved ones that you're locked up with on your starship and think about what are the things that are really good right now. What do you have to be thankful for? What are the things that you have opportunities to do now that you might not have had opportunities to do before? None of us like to think about dying, especially from a disease like this. It's a reality, and it's a scary reality. But it is not the only reality. So, hope you're doing okay. Hope you're doing well. Please feel free to drop me a line if you have any questions, and we will just see where this goes from here. Y'all stay safe out there.